if you're wandering around naively with your eyes closed and you run into someone who's really psychopathic, they'll take you apart and you'll have no defense against it whatsoever because you're too blind and naive. And if you encounter someone like that and they leave you in the ashes, which they might, it's certainly possible that you'll never recover from it. You just will not be able to handle the aftermath, but also you won't be able to handle the fact that something like that could actually happen. And that's really the nature of trauma. You cannot believe that that could actually happen. And that's an encounter, it's almost always, and this has been the case, certainly been my clinical experience. What traumatizes people is malevolence. It's not tragedy, although tragedy can traumatize people if it's severe enough. But generally, no, people can withstand tragedy. They are done in by real malevolence. And so sometimes it's the realization of their own malevolence that does them in. But when that isn't the case, they encounter someone who's out there in the world who's actually operating to hurt them. And so, and if the person is psychopathic enough, and this is actually goes beyond pure psychopathy, because at least the psychopath has the sense to be self-interested. You can go far farther than that, where you're perfectly willing to hurt yourself as long as you hurt the other person at the same time. What they want to say is, life means nothing to me, nothing. But I'm perfectly willing to make as many people as I possibly can suffer before I demonstrate that.
The title of her video was, she was being interviewed because she had been a survivor of satanic ritual abuse. Now, anyone who's in this circle of information and traffic in the information that we do, there's a lot of us in the quote-unquote truther movement who are very interested and are very concerned about the whole ritual, satanic, child abuse situation. So that's what steered me there. Now, after further investigation, she makes some serious claims about what was being done to her as when she was a child, and that's what brought me interested in her work. So I had a little look around, but what caused the red flags for me was this. She does seminars and kind of talks to the camera as to not being a victim. I mean, she's a perfect example of how to overcome being a victim. Look at me, I've survived being a victim of satanic ritual abuse, and I'm talking the darkest type is the type that this woman describes, which is very questionable, but I don't know if we can discuss that right now. And what alerted me was the fact that she comes across very strong, but after listening to an interview with you, Cameron, I listened to a 5-hour interview of your experience living with this woman. It turns out that her public persona and what she's actually trying to present herself to be isn't in fact what she really is behind closed doors. Now, do you care to discuss what happened when you were, you actually went and lived with her?
It was insanity, pure insanity. I've never met a crazier, more unstable person in my entire life, but I can't say that it's because of abuse. I just find her to be mentally ill in my opinion, she's just very manipulative, pathologically manipulative. She's a fabulist and a confabulator, and I would call her a mythomaniac. She makes up stories. She's a fabulist and a confabulator, and I would call her a mythomaniac. She makes up stories. I'm a more unstable person in my entire life, but I can't say that it's because of abuse. I just find her to be mentally ill in my opinion, she's just very manipulative, pathologically manipulative. She's a fabulist and a confabulator, and I would call her a mythomaniac. She makes up stories. I can't say that it's because of abuse. I just find her to be mentally ill in my opinion, she's just very manipulative. I would call her a mythomaniac. She makes up stories.
Did not even look to see if anything that I said was accurate. He just wrote down schizoaffective.
The spiritual catalyst, and they were asking me whether I made a research on her life, like a deep research. Kept always in mind the fact that she was under the effect of drugs, and especially ketamine. And these kind of drugs has an impact on your consciousness has an impact of the way you perceive reality. It's totally distorted. So she might maybe remember things in a different way, but that doesn't mean that the whole story didn't happen. And I did a lot of research as well. I dig into her journals where she was recovering, and I found my own answers. Of this documentary again was not to investigate into TEAL SWAN. The intention of this documentary was just to document TEAL sharing her story. The intention of this documentary was just to document TEAL sharing her story. The intention of this documentary again was not to investigate into TEAL SWAN. The intention of this documentary was just to document TEAL sharing her story. The intention of this documentary again was not to investigate into TEAL SWAN. The intention of this documentary was just to document TEAL sharing her story.
And one of the things that you see, this is worth knowing too, because if you're preyed upon by a psychopath, which you will be to some degree at some point in your life, the psychopath, who will be narcissistic, will presume that you're stupid and that you deserve to be taken advantage of because you're naive and stupid. So it's actually a good thing that he's doing it. And his proof for, and I'm saying he because there are more male psychopaths, the proof that you're stupid, naive, is that he can take advantage of you. And so, like, if you were wiser, you'd be, you'd know his tricks, and then it wouldn't be morally necessary for him to show you just exactly who knows what about what. And so the psychopath will use his ability to fool you as proof of his own grandiose omnipotence, omniscience, and narcissism. And the problem with that is that you can be fooled by a psychopath. And virtually anybody can. So that Robert Hare, for example, who studied psychopaths for a long time and interviewed a lot of them, like hundreds of them, and videotaped many of the interviews, he said when he was talking to the psychopath, he always believed what they were saying. And then he'd watch the video afterwards and see where the conversation went off the rails. But, the proclivity to be polite in a conversation is very strong. He was talking to the psychopath, he always believed what they were saying. And then he'd watch the video afterwards and see where the conversation went off the rails. But, the proclivity to be polite in a conversation is very strong. And if you're polite, you don't object to the way that the person unfolds their strategy, And psychopaths are pretty good at figuring out how to manipulate, obviously, how to manipulate people. And the probability that you will be immune to that is extraordinarily low. Go watch Paul Bernardo being interviewed by policemen on YouTube.
The letter that was sent to the police, wasn't specific enough to identify independents. Now that's something that we can talk about sort of following this interview. If you want to get into that, we can talk about that.
But I've been sitting with this for years. It's written on my file. Just this crazy. You guys love doing that on this crazy psychopathic line. Why was that statement issued? Why didn't they come in and talk to me? We were waiting. That tape, we played that tape back. I asked you guys if you were going to come in. I sat there. We got that. No one came. Turned on the TV in September. Declared that Paul Bernardo was, this crazy liar to police. What's the fundamental problem?
Well,
I mean, justice the Canadian way, and no one comes in, and now you guys are saying that you didn't have enough information.
Well, I can't answer for them specifically as to what they did or didn't do. I can tell you, because they're a separate police department, I don't have any control over what investigation that they did. And I can tell you that I have spoken with the investigator in TEAL region, and they have told me that At this point, they don't have enough information.
That statement they didn't do as much to the public statement they said I was a liar.
I don't.
There's 90 days and they didn't come in. If they didn't have enough information, why don't you come in and get the information? I mean, either I'm lying or I'm not lying. And this goes to the crux of this argument. Either I'm lying to you, I'm lying to you right now, freaking like a big mutual.
Psychopaths are pretty good at figuring out how to manipulate, obviously, how to manipulate people. And the probability that you will be immune to that is extraordinarily low. Go watch Paul Bernardo being interviewed by policemen on YouTube. That's bloody, that's enlightening, man. Paul Bernardo, he's like the CEO of a meeting in that video, you know? He gives the cops hell, he gives the lawyers hell, he protests his innocence. He basically tells them that they're rude and untrustworthy because they don't trust him because he did a few little things 17 years ago. And he gets away with it, a few little things, right? I mean, he killed a bunch of people, including the sister of his girlfriend at the time, and, you know, he was a repeat sexual offender and murderer. It's like, but he basically goes, well, you know, that's a long time ago. It's like, we're past that, aren't we? I mean, I'm having a discussion with you. I'm trying to help you solve some crimes, which, by the way, I committed, but we won't bring that up. You know, and you're accusing me of being a liar. Like, you're not playing fair. What's up with you? And when they answer, he looks at his fingernails, which is like, that's a lovely little manipulative thing, because it basically means whatever happens to be under my fingernail at the moment is much higher priority than listening to your foolish story. And you watch, you'll see people do that to you, and then you get a little insight into what they're up to. Or he looks outside, or he just looks at his hands, or he looks out the window, immediately dismissive in his nonverbal behavior.
If you have a narcissistic loved one, chances are you are familiar with narcissistic lies. They lie about big things, they lie about small things, they lie for no reason at all. As a friend of mine's dad used to say, they'd lie if the truth sounded better. This is very frustrating because it's hard to have any kind of a relationship with someone if you can't believe anything they say. You can't trust them and you can't depend on them. Honesty is a cornerstone of intimacy, so it's no surprise that, as narcissists are pathologically afraid of intimacy, they would have issues in this area. Narcissistic people lie for a few reasons. Some are the same as the reasons most people lie, and some are not. They might be trying to boost their own false image, they might be trying to get out of trouble or avoid responsibility, they might be trying to be contrary, or it might be that they simply have a different truth today.
It's not even her teaching. She's just, she's stolen so many things, and she Googles everything. I mean, this is all, none of her material is new material. She's hybridized versions of crap. And I didn't know this at the time because I was very new to spirituality, but as I've dug more into these teachings that she proffers, none of it's original. And so being around her and seeing somebody that was just so incongruent, I mean, the first day that I got there, she's talking about, she was just kind of out of it, just crazy, and looking at the grocery store, she's pretending she can see the vibrations on vegetables, and just, one of those people that you're like, what did I just get myself into here?
Because there was just no doubt in my mind that anything that you saw and experienced what was not true. I had no doubt that it was true. Now, she claims, she actually has people to plug things into the wall for her because she's afraid of getting an electric shock. Is that right? She's got like minions that do things for her.
Yes, that was her. I saw this after I left because I found this so ridiculous. She claims that the electroshocks from her abuse in this trailer that she did for her documentary force her now to have people plug her appliances in this documentary. But it's a total performance act for the camera, because when I was there, I actually had seen her plug things in many times without so much as a pause, including her blow dryer, her cell phone, laptop. And so this documentary that they're doing, or this trailer where she has people plugging things into the wall for her, and she's pretending to have PTSD from all of her trauma. I mean, not only does it not attest to the effectiveness of her techniques and her methods, but it's just complete fabrication.
I still have a problem plugging things in because of the electroshocks. And they hooked me up to electroshocks and walked me towards like a the washer and dryer, and then they'll shock you when you go to open it, and so your brain develops a response, typical Pavlovian response, where if you think about doing dishes or anything like laundry, then you get that same physical sensation of being electroshocked. So they make it so it's not possible for you to take care of yourself. That no self-care rule is super crucial. So I don't know how many of you really know about the childhood which I experienced, but it was full of really extreme abuse. And at one particular point, I was basically inducted into a cult. And in this cult, part of what I must admit to doing as a teenager was deliberately programming children. Yes, isn't that great? It's benefiting me today, right? Why? Because now I get to use a lot of these techniques to set people free. The mental chess game, you know? Hello there.
Hey, Teal.
The brain is a tool that is designed to facilitate life here on Earth.
Not correct. Incorrect.
And the purpose for life here is expansion.
No, also I was gonna let you talk, but I have to correct you on two inaccurate statements. First off, the brain was not designed to do shit, okay? It evolved to do things over time based on necessity and random chaos. It was not designed for anything. And number two, life is not all about expansion, alright? Things that expand are not always good. Sometimes you want some contractions in life. For instance, when cancer expands, is that good? What about AIDS? AIDS tends to expand by spreading to people through sexual contact or otherwise. Is that also good? I'm just curious because it seems to me as though you think expansion is somehow the source of all things, the source of goodness in the universe. And it seems to me that that's a blatantly retarded statement to be making. For instance, another example, what about the Nazi Empire? Should we have wanted them to expand as well? Although, I don't know what your answer on that might be.
We couldn't gain expansion out of life if we couldn't survive here. And so the brain is equipped, first and foremost, with survival mechanisms. Things that pose a threat to us are of much...
Things that pose a threat to society. Pro-suicide New Age charlatans? Telling everyone that killing themselves is completely inconsequential? Could that be something that poses a threat to society?
Before you know it, you're involved in a deep personal bond with a psychopath.
The former mental health professional actually evaluate her, and she's been, among other things, diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which is a combination of schizophrenia and major depression. She's been diagnosed as antisocial personality disorder, which is also known as sociopathy and psychopathy. She's narcissistic personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. I mean, she claims that she has these other post-traumatic stress and dissociative, but those are highly doubted by this health professional that did a diagnosis.
And I have found it very easy to be seduced by the tone and the affect and the engagement of a psychopath who, with great earnestness, tells me that he's finally found the light in.
And what I realized was, this is why I got into this business in the first place, is because I actually do have the one thing that would work for that person.
At the point you start to see a disconnect with what he's saying and what he's experiencing.
Her story is hard to believe. Do you ever doubt that maybe this is just some sort of nightmare that you had and you just relived it, or do you ever doubt that this happened to you?
No.
Ever?
No.
That's a pretty good definition for our species, but Homo fictus, fiction man, story man, that's about equally accurate. Man is a storytelling animal.
Narcissist is the narcissist who thinks only about himself, who is entitled and grandiose, but yet they believe that they deserve the world's attention, a person's attention, society's attention, so much that they will go to any means to secure that. But the malignant narcissist enjoys, appreciates, and will do almost anything to have followers, to protect others, to represent a community, a city, a country. And this malignant narcissist will do anything to protect themselves. But these individuals, as malignant narcissists, they loved, needed, and required people to love them. They rose to power by representing themselves as a savior of types.
Same thing, you have to learn how to love yourself. And I'm like, well, how does somebody do that? And no one could answer the question. They're like, you just gotta love yourself. I was ready to tear my hair out, but by the end of it, I was like, you know what? Nobody has the answer. That's the reality, isn't it? The reality is that everybody knows you should, but nobody knows how. So that really started my own process where I wanted to find out what it actually meant on a practical level to love yourself versus hate yourself. So I started studying people who did love themselves. And I gotta tell you, like, this was the most obnoxious process I have been through. Because when you hate yourself, being around people who love themselves, it's like, it's sort of like, let's say that you were starving to death in some African country, and then like someone flies you over to an industrialized country, and you go into a grocery store and you realize they throw like 1,000 pounds of food.
As for what I thought about the story, obviously there are events that they might sound far-fetched, they might sound unbelievable. I kept always in mind the fact that she was under the effect of drugs, and especially ketamine. And these kind of drugs has an impact on your consciousness, has an impact of the way you perceive reality. It's totally distorted. So she might maybe remember things in a different way, but that...
Teal's a fraud. Teal shouldn't be talking. Why do you think you're an authority on this subject?
Performance act for the camera. Just a total act for the camera. So to me, it's just a joke when I see those things now. But I mean, of course, people are really, really sucked into the story. That's exactly what she is. She's a cognitive dissonance factory. Okay, all of her followers she keeps people in their emotional centers, and their logical centers become disabled. So she's able to be a hypocrite. She's able to not walk her talk. She's able to get exalted for her shadows and pretty much encouraged for her insanity, and at the same time she's claiming to show people the way out, and she's actually creating more insanity in the process.
They loved, needed, and required people to love them. They rose to power by representing themselves as a savior of types. The narcissistic urge to get power and to protect their legion of followers compels them to do almost anything. And once in power, the malignant narcissist will maintain his or her power structure that will, by itself, keep it up, keep it going so that no one can threaten it.
It's absolute insanity. And, you know, it's a very egotistic crowd that this is appealing to. And at the same time, she's also marketing herself as a trauma and abuse survivor, so she's getting a lot of mentally and emotionally wounded people that are following her.
And she has a movie in production, and I saw a trailer of this movie, and they are seriously making, the marketing behind it is amazing. They're making this woman look like she's basically an angel. She's an angel sent from heaven here to help humanity. This is how far they are going with the illusion.
I have a message for that producer as well. That that producer is not making a documentary. That is no documentary. There's no fact-checking. It's actually more like a shameless hagiography, trying to idolize this life of a saint. And she knows that people have raised criticisms. She didn't bother to go and try to track down the abuser or get the full story or anything that a normal, actual film would do in a documentary type of setting, which is probably why they can't get an actual producer to take on the project. They're having to crowdfund it because the actual people want facts. They want the whole story. You can't just slap this up there and say, oh, this is the truth, and we're not going to check the other side of it. So, I mean, it's a joke, really, and people are paying for this slander of this poor man, and this is what they're buying into, and nobody's checking it because she's got some sycophantic woman who's infatuated with her producing the movie. That's what it is. She's got a person that's one of her followers making the movie for her.